Hello friends. Why did James leave to Deep? What will the confrontation with John be like? James's company used to be one of the largest corporations in the field of agricultural investment and development. However, recently, the company has been in constant financial trouble. Important contracts were canceled. Capital was suddenly withdrawn and partners gradually turned their backs. No one knows that behind all these events is John, a man with a deep grudge against the James family. One morning, James received news from Assistant Tuan that the group of workers had marched to the company headquarters, request for payment. When James got out of the car, a group of angry workers surrounded him. "We have been working hard for the past few months. Now you say the company is bankrupt, that's it." One person shouted, "Right, Mr. James, if you don't pay, we won't leave you alone." James tried to calm them down. "Let me understand people's difficulties. I will resolve this issue as soon as possible." However, the crowd was not appeased. Some people also smashed things in front of the headquarters. Security forces had to intervene, but the situation is still extremely tense. See, the situation is getting more serious. James decided to find his brother Alex, a person who is a major shareholder of a financial group. James hopes Alex can help him with some money to save the company. "Older brother, James, I would love to help you, but the amount of money you need is too much. Furthermore, I also have my own obligations to other shareholders," Alex said awkwardly. James sighed, understanding that he could not rely on his family. He had to find a way to overthrow John and save the company himself. Realizing that John was watching her every move, James decided to distract him by pretending seriously ill. He deliberately created pressure that caused his health to decline, then hospitalized to avoid enemy surveillance. Tuan quickly informed Cho to Deep about her. "James is in the hospital. She should visit him." Hearing the news, to Deep rushed to the hospital. She brought home cooked porridge. Worriedly looked at James lying on the hospital bed. "How do you see? Do you need me to call the doctor?" she asked with concern. Goat smiled weakly, holding her hand. "He was fine. Just having you by my side is enough. Look strong, man." One day now lying motionless in hospital bed, To Deep's heart could not help but ache. Midnight when James was go to bed, John quietly walked into the hospital room. He thought that James had lost the ability to fight. Stood next to the bed and whispered, "Goat, but do you know why your company went bankrupt? I invested in it and then withdrew my capital to make you collapse. Do you know why? Because your family took my land in the past. Made Dao have to wander to Thailand, but now I'm back and I'm going to make you pay." Said and left. Not knowing that every word he said was recorded on the phone, which James secretly placed near the bedside. As soon as the door closed, James opened his eyes. He immediately picked up the phone. Is on the bedside table. Display screen does not record 031547. A cold smile appeared on Dream's lips. "John, you are done." James looked at the phone screen. His smile was calculating. This recording is the most important weapon. Help him overthrow John. But he knew that if he wasn't careful, John will counterattack and may strike first. He called Cho Tuan in a calm but determined voice. "Plan change. We cannot rely on this evidence alone. Need support from lawyers and police. What are you going to do?" Tuan asked Dao will make him dig his own grave. After leaving the hospital, James secretly met with his private lawyer, a middle-aged man named Lam, person with extensive connections in the legal world. I have important evidence. John admitted he was a drug dealer, but I need you to help me legalize it, to let the police in. Lam Kao thought, one recording is not enough to catch him, but if we can make him do it again, in a formal meeting. James nodded he had a plan in mind. I will lure him. Despite significant progress, but James knew the worst was yet to come. When John found out Ra had someone against him, he will not forgive. And what James worries about most is Deep. If John knew how important she was to him, he will definitely find a way to harm her. That night, James made an appointment to meet Deep for the last time. They stood on the roof of the hospital. The cold wind blew through, bringing with it a feeling of unease. You know, I used to think after all this, we can start over together. James looked at her with pained eyes. Deep felt something was wrong. James, what's up? He was silent for a moment, then turned away. We cannot go on anymore. Deep was stunned. What are you talking about? I don't want you to get caught up in these dangerous things. Deep bit her lips, her eyes turned red. Groan, I thought you would leave me. If there is danger, I want to be with you. James grabbed her hand, but then he let go. I'm sorry. He turned and walked away without daring to look back. Deep stood still, tears rolling down. 2 days later, James took the initiative to arrange a meeting with John. This time he did not pretend to be sick. He appeared at a fancy bar waiting for John. He walked in still cold and smug. I thought you were bedridden. John smiled faintly. James raised his glass of wine, his eyes cold. You have gone too far. John raised an eyebrow. What do you mean wine? Turn on the phone, press a button. John's voice rang out. Dao is a drug lord in Thailand. John's face stiffened, but he immediately burst out laughing. So why can't a recording do anything to me, James? James put the phone down on the table. I know, but what about the video? Startled. The police have been following you for a long time, and I just need to show this proof and it's done. John gritted his teeth. His eyes flashed with fire. You dare set a trap for me? Not to trap you, but to bring you into the light. The worm stood up to leave, but as soon as he turned his back, the police surrounded the entire pub. An inspector stepped forward and held up an arrest warrant. He was arrested for international drug trafficking. John glared at James. James just stood there watching him get handcuffed and led away. Victory is yours. After John was arrested, James's company gradually stabilized again. But there is one thing James still cannot fix. That is the relationship with Deep. He stood in front of her door, hesitated for a moment, then knocked. Deep opened the door and looked at him with eyes that were both angry and heartbroken. What are you doing? James took a deep breath. I'm sorry for leaving you. She was silent. I thought if I left you I would be safe, but I was wrong. The only thing I need all this time is you. Deep looked into his eyes. Her eyes were sparkling. Do you still owe me an answer? Do you love me? I laughed and held her hand. I love you. Deep smiled slightly, laughing, tears falling down. But this time they were tears of happiness. And so after the storm, they found each other again. After John was arrested, everything was over. But James quickly realized that there are still many things that cannot be resolved. His company is still having financial difficulties. Capital withdrawal caused a serious shortage of cash flow for the company. Although James' reputation was restored, but investors are still hesitant to invest again. James knew he needed to make a bold move. James decided to meet his brother to express his gratitude, who is a successful businessman. The meeting took place in a fancy restaurant. I haven't been in touch with you for years, and now he comes here to borrow money. Burian raised an eyebrow at James. James sighed. I know you have reasons not to trust me, but I need help. Burian was silent for a moment, then said, What do you intend to do with this money? I will save the company. Without this capital, he could not have recovered. Burian thousand games for a long time. He said at last, Okay, I will lend you, but on one condition. What condition? You have to accept a new shareholder as me. James frowned, but he understood that this was the only way to save the company. With your consent. And so the two brothers officially cooperated. When Burian became a shareholder, many changes began to take place in the company. Burian is a pragmatic businessman, while James still puts ethics and human values first. This caused the two to conflict many times. One day in the classroom, Burian threw the file on the table. Mr. James, if we want the company to survive, we need to cut staff. James shook his head. No, I will not let hundreds of workers lose their jobs just for temporary hardship. If you keep thinking like that, the company will go bankrupt. Very angry, James stood up coldly. You have your way. If you don't believe me, I will prove it myself. The war between the two brothers officially begins. After many days of thinking, Deep decided to return to help James. She couldn't stand by and watch him alone face all difficulties. The day she returned, the whole company was in an uproar. James saw her eyes flash with surprise. What are you doing back? Deep smiled. This company is also my passion. Do you think I can ignore? James sighed softly, but his heart felt warmer than ever. Thank you. Tensions between James and Burian escalated. Burian continuously proposes strong measures, such as selling off company assets, layoffs, even merge with a large corporation to get more capital. But James remained firm in his stance. One day, for thank you to the office, James put a contract on the table. This is the merger proposal. If you sign, the company will have new capital to escape the risk of bankruptcy. James looked at the contract, then looked up at his brother. And in return, you will lose control of the company. Exactly. James was silent for a long time, and finally he picked up the pen. But instead of signing, he tore up the contract. I will not let this company fall into someone else's hands. Barry glared at him. You will regret it. We will see who regrets it. The battle between the two brothers officially broke out. James decided to find a new direction to save the company, without depending on Burian. He and Deep planned to launch a new product, attract customers and investors, Every night they work until late. But this time James was not alone anymore. Too Deep is always with you. Encourage him to overcome all difficulties. After months of effort, new product officially launched and successful beyond expectations. Investors are starting to come back. The company is gradually coming out of the crisis. Periel is angry because her plan failed. But it must be admitted that James was right. One day he walked into James' office and sighed. "You win." James smiled. "Not you win. But our company is still standing." Finally, the two brothers reconciled. After many storms, the company is finally back on its feet. James and Too Deep standing on the rooftop, looking down at the city lights. Too Deep turned to him and smiled. Finally, it was done. James took her hand with loving eyes. "Not yet, this is just the beginning." Both look at each other towards the future. And this time they will move forward together. Please leave a comment.